faceless green line itself. Launches the reaction out of fierce nearly end of provision approach interpreting facts and silence says yes. It reflects the long-term legal uncertainty present in setting the ancient lawyers have tried to develop more sustainable framing their efforts to defend the legal challenges wall as these allies consider one of the supported by certain other countries, including Western China, the targeted killing, as weapons proliferate down, makes instead of local critical government to sacrifice purpose legal footing. The legal expert says the U.S. says that in the Yemen, the Somalia, the when the doctrine remains open in chapter 5. Sure, geographic evidence of in your face is not stable. Leading sources are proven about the use of Pakistan and dual key systems starting about 40 years ago. The U.S. began to go alone in meetings of official races possible with drone drawdown. The idea of that has been highly debated. Officials consider the proposal to be a more present without detail. America's race responsible for creating a joint ownership, but no changes were agreed to. Also, U.S. legal silences the critical issue of Pakistan sovereignty, creates a global precedent for sovereignty violation. Rogers left the U.S. Clinton, the Pakistan consent of no longer be sued. Officials have voiced a strong opposite to on drone sex have continued to have the U.S. justified by the national sovereignty of Pakistan. The national sovereignty prohibition use of force in accordance with international law. Obama is unclear whether he believes the right to act in self-defense is defined in the act of any geographic territory. What about law? Or what about Islamabad? What about other countries' law? Is so far the U.S. acting in self-defense against specific military groups based in order to practice one of the boundaries of the battlefield. Under what specific circumstances can the U.S. violate Pakistan's sovereignty? The U.S. adheres to right be the violation of sovereignty purposeful when the target cities are unable or unable to prevent target attacks from the territory to silence and fill the conspiracy theories on friendly regimes and leaders will be on both in the cross-border attacks and assassination comforted by that legal ambiguity and now miscalculation would escalate globally. Specifically China, India, Pakistan, and Iran would escalate Bergen 12 social geotechnology driven the new arbitration of the House of Drugs, the U.S. is that dangerous precedent for other nations with its aggressive programs. John could imagine how India might launch an attack in Kashmir or China, Uyghur separatists or all out with nationalists. The U.S. sector power national norm about the use of armed drone which is used for Pakistan and Yemen is these kind of strikes that are controversial because drones in a conventional war is not much more different than an aircraft that will break down deterrent swarms. Oil 13, the consequential understability, these rapid reshape by drone type. The stability is driven by nuclear deterrence. States may be willing to engage in drone overflights. We'll see what would motivate a response. Drones by gradually rather deterrent relation that crisis between nuclear powers magnify the risk of fire conflict that proliferation of drones is involved in the risk of accidents. The U.S. has set a dangerous precedent. Two scenarios. First, Armenia conquers conflicts Johnson, Israel, Iran, and Russia claim 12 to Armenia as their budget was to be able to drone public world sense border continues to conquer spots in the region, also hosts oil and gas pipelines, and tangle weapon lines, special research that quickly escalate the border skirmish and expect violation to a wider regional conflict competition including Israel, Russia, and Iran. As temporary incidents become more deadly, there's an increase in tension to lead the accident war wars coming at any given moment. Each side is preparing for single conflict drones are buzzing because of international law remains making of illegality using them Armenia as a war. It would be very catastrophic for the rest would be very quick escalation to the international level. Armenia as like Russia with troops Iran also supports Armenia. Israel's following Armenia as a war will not be small. Israel Iran conflict will cause nuclear war. Russell, non-US combatant allies including the terrorist weakness supports the market framing the strategic ambiguity and instability which escalation unfold leading to nuclear weapons used by either the US, Israel, or Iran. Once commences, difficult to imagine Iran would be hunkering down Iran in the state of the attack will result in a wider war. The Israel pressure could combine the sense of nuclear use and adoption. Second, China and Asian drone wars, Rimley and 13. China's drone invention are compared to already with similar relation to the drones in Asia will bring instability, escalation, fierce against the SES. The conflict will result in mining citizens finals to control advances with Japanese turn of you have a perfect recipe of the concern is not using technology but the lack of norms for their use and confidence. Parts of these capable of being feeling the most geopolitically dangerous area in the world is absent political leadership. These technologies will lead to regions of warfare that would cause nuclear war. While there 13 Taiwan control the nuclear war by the year between China and the US and the expert report concludes this is a classic recipe for miscalculation, escalation, uncontrolled escalation. The kindling disputes in the SDS provides a kindling for a conflict. The elevation Washington have agreed to crisis management. The bases for miscommunication draws on a historical reservoir of suspicion and independently executive uncertainty would cause accidental and miscalculation. Deemed 13 the state running world would be on everything that the states can have determined to be on the receiving end of missile distance, certainty alone poses a truly detailed frying implication goes to have the rights to conventional understanding of the battlefield. Representatives opened up the entire world to a drone attack of the U.S. riding off under principal engagement as a dangerous precedent. Action drones poses a threat even more terrifying than nuclear proliferation, hallucinating the lead to unfettered global drone warfare among a host of different states and creating a legal drone regime is critical. Pakistan is critical. Hosari and told the CIA drone program in Pakistan is something about having legal issues addressed. There could be a move that could backfire. The use of drones will conduct the kind of state strikes without the criticism not the use of the technology strikes amount of extrajudicial killing without clearly any policy war. We are witnessing Pakistan as a potential to result in state order murder the order and national norms against the target assassination single finding overarching legal regime that governs the utilization drones to clarify the ambiguous gray areas by permitting drones on a solid legal footing that would create a critical form of strikes and even Pakistan and the regulator woman in the Congress and email to do so on my suggest a high ground and the rebound upon the U.S. itself. Congress is critical to a binding regime. Web 13 Obama has been following the executive orders and the circumvented legislative process says it's not surprising the House uses foreign policy does phrase legally binding only specific legislation only agreed upon the Congress could act in such a commitment that it's difficult to understand how any other agreement is having the only very second can be considered legally binding. Such an agreement is legally binding. One must ask what law binds and how and who it must be enforced. And law is critical. That means Congress is key to that. Statutory roadmap. Maxwell 12 activities not covered from the U.S. Extrapolation. The only entity that confirms the president's power and settle the president's power is Congress. Congress must give a statutory roadmap that articulates a circumstances that statutory clarification will give other states a roadmap that allow the president order to target killing without congressional limits. Means the president can manipulate force without having any national norms. It gives other states the president to do the same without Congress. The process to use the rule of law. I made it too straight. Drones will ruin Shuri's political leadership and status quo. Those are two secret king packs on the go over the summon the top on with the launch partners over the strikes, the down street fully intensive aggressive push financial strikes. Show defense of the US strikes, response quickly cover the launch political spaces again, and the also carry attack moving the country where the rebels against charged by even more vocal against the drones, Shuri defensive strike balance to approach to the US reaction more stringent has possibly disrupted the relationship with the economy, but then strikes Pakistan that could give more room to opposite politics economy drain support for the stream. Khan has been especially starting against the strikes. Obama has already tried to halt Pakistani drug supply, but that is not sufficient because it's still under my Shuri government 226. A general government by US Pakistan and the day with the drone programs. Obama's new approach reflecting the Pakistan government because Obama sharply curtailed the strikes Pakistan after requests for details to peace with the Taliban senior official characters in timetable with the Obama administration between the US Pakistan government to change and fall short of the streets made for the immediate freeze. No true agreement has been reached. There is no question Pakistan requesting the US. We want a complete stop. The government still apparently opposed even tapering their approach. And Sharif's election means that relations are in a position to skyrocket right now, but the plan is critical to save it. Israel and Turkey, the two countries will submit a high-level on proposition will cover all the key issues, but the two talks about after the US relations house improvement. There is still signal with the intention regarding strikes between message there is a positive resetting ties with government and working together the major issues counter-terror, energy, regional stability, economic forums, and trading events. And officials worry about the pushback, however, from Sharif, who wants tax and the two scenarios versus energy shares is key to critical to solve Pakistan's economic collapse as well as multiple trading blocks that independently solve multiple great power wars. Units, Turkey, Sharif is in these orders steps to Pakistan economy to bring the collapse due to energy reforms and law and order foreign policy will determine what Pakistan can level the investment as well as trading and foreign policy will also honor those drone strikes. Sharif has made statements about relation to India and trade-based solution to back Afghanistan and Iran to the interest in Jordan and China will be a part of any trading agreement. Pakistan holds the key to reintegrating Central and Southwest Asia through trading routes and coins trading blocks or virtually present coins trading block will do wonders, enabling trade to go a long way. Increasing trade to crisis budget trade Sharif must use trust as a move to move the region animosity will credit environment the trade resources and funds and arms attack lead to further escalation failure to the world guarantee further military and stability Central Asia resource source will cause the war by cargo 9 action like some action provides responsibility fees will come in the instability situation now so the empire supporting social conflict and insecurity Central Asia is an important stakeholder and the Caspian and its game situation from several structural neighborhood cities and actors competing in the research China's increasing presence in Russia has also denoted its influence and their securities fall under the rubric of geopolitics as well as a state upon which actors can engage in game under the great power policy Central Asia with the sufficient effect and instability would draw from interest would be actors and catalysts to lead to region until over instability Pakistan and instability caused impacts of war and 9 Pakistan and the Russian all possessed to go over the violence and real potential crack from the gates of Palo South Pakistan and military establishment cities top of the government nuclear army in India could be galvanized into military action asking China or Russia losing to places down world and collision course with unimagined disaster tower causing extinction start above the here percentages for they less than 1% of nuclear weapons would immediately cause catastrophic drops in climate and ozone layer. Best scientists tell us that such a warming to end human history arsenal true here past deficit ecosystem human existence single veil would lead to nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Two second scenarios Afghanistan withdrawal that's critical to a successful Afghanistan withdrawal. One country in Pakistan is critical to ensuring the state of Pakistan in order for is critical to withdrawal from its region and makes key logistics routes to the U.S. House to develop the relation to the more comprehensive level of strategic dialogue faces several thorny issues. Drone attacks on violent Pakistan sovereignty at the top of the list. The government needs to resolve these issues, change the perception, overcome the obstacles to terror, and now wartime help the key process between India, Pakistan, and cooperation between Pakistan and the U.S. makes the interest of South Asia. That's critical to solve nuclear war. Current continuing with the ISIL withdrawal, and then one of the questions one of the deals will be ahead of the currency behind as the U.S. withdraws out, yielding the dynamic would be irresponsible, like neighbors so attractive for a position without regard to the danger of the gender dynamics results in nuclear war. Next play. The United States Congress should restrict the President's targeted killing authority by requiring that targeted killing operation be taken under carry upon specified areas with the Pakistan's Defense Committee of the Cabinet. That's also the case. Marking 13, the U.S. referred to Pakistan not like to survive the new programs, all like to devolve their president offering a endorsement. The U.S. is going to have to came on the new drone deal. New agreements compare the campaign against their kind of affirmative political footing without limiting suffering to Washington. Africa, the ships and policy would lead to some of the escalated diplomatic pressure. One could imagine a chief threatening to shoot down U.S. drones from the sky. Washington will the drones would be normal operation, only realistic compromise waiting for Washington seeking some pre-authorization of specific targets and zones strikes and just prosecute in front of the legal authority along a mutually agreed different target list of leaders who know determined that Washington itself with acceptance back into the repeating loss and door front of the conversation and bringing their programs out of the shadows of authority will shift the CIA to the Pentagon pre-authorization regime and be foregoing. The signature strikes officials will be wise not to let relations Pakistan deteriorate. The U.S. is facing challenges in Pakistan and the nuclear army battling hardline Islamist insurgency.
Okay, your NTOS evidence says that Pakistani consent is, or the lack of Pakistani consent is setting an international precedent. What is that precedent?
There's an unable or unwilling doctrine that the U.S. uses codified in its targeted killing policy that allows the U.S. to violate other countries' national airspace.
Okay, so the plan resolves the unable or unwilling doctrine with regards to Pakistan. What about other countries?
We have arguments that Pakistan is critical because it's our legal ambiguity over Pakistan that allows us to strike in other areas and that allows other countries to also violate other nations' airspace.
What about the act of U.S. violating sovereignty in Pakistan causes us to violate it elsewhere?
Well, no, that's not the argument. It's that we're only violating in Pakistan, but that enables other countries to model.
So we're only violating in Pakistan?
Yes, the evidence says that makes consent all the more critical. We have that in Yemen, in Somalia, we don't in Pakistan.
What countries are going to use this precedent? Is it China, Indo-Pak, and Iran?
Those are the three countries that could potentially use it, but
Okay,
we say that
where-
there's
who would they use
a
it
legal
against?
precedent for other countries.
Who would they use it against?
It could be against other countries. So like India might be able to launch it in Kashmir or other Pakistani areas. China might be able to use it in the SDSA.
There's a lot of
countries.
mights. I want to
Russia,
know
right.
why
I
it would
mean,
be
I
in
can't
their
make
interest
deterministic
to do
statements
so.
because that's not how IR functions. But it's like there's a higher probability that they would because there's such legal ambiguity
High
that it
probability,
increases
but
the
we don't
likelihood
really
of
know whether they
I mean,
would.
if you want me to say 100%, sure.
Okay, I guess I'm
but
wondering why
I think that's like a
why
false scholarship.
you read a couple of pieces of cards at the bottom of the U.S. aggression advantage. It's like a clear regime is key. What is clear about congressional action?
It provides a statutory roadmap in numerous ways. One provides a legal binding regime and consultation mechanism between U.S. and Pakistan that resolves the legal ambiguity. Number two, it provides a statutory roadmap that allows other.
Okay, so there are
to
two things there. First is it provides the consultation mechanism. That doesn't seem unique to Congress.
No, binding. It has to be congressional
binding.
in order for it to be binding.
Binding. Oh, so
Yes.
your August future executives may undo it?
Well, that
Not
and
only
current
that.
executives. The web evidence is
Oh.
phenomenal. It says
Okay.
Obama has proven himself to be fond of executive orders designed to circumvent the legislative process. It is not surprising that this approach will be used in foreign policy.
Okay, your-
legally binding,
that's
only
fine. Your
specifying the
Sharif
legislation based on
legitimacy
Congress can
advantage.
actually create such a
Your
commitment.
Goodman evidence says that Sharif wants a freeze on drone strikes. What about that? Why, absent a freeze on drone strikes, would he not cooperate with the U.S.?
Well, the only reason, there are two reasons. First is that the freeze is temporary because of peace talks. Second is that the freeze was a unilateral move rather than a consultative move. Pakistan doesn't want us
So
to
it's
just,
about
end
making
strikes
the
like.
freeze permanent.
No, I said that's only the first reason. The second reason is that Pakistan actually does want strikes in certain ways. They don't want us to just end strikes. They want a consultating mechenism, however, to be able
But
to
it's
have a
about
voice
a
in the
permanent
process.
consultation mechanism.
Which is the second part, yes.
Okay, that's cool.
Colin, what's your email so I can throw it in?
Jacob.eolin@gmail.
Just sent out the 1 and C, 5 off, aggression, Sharif.
Okay, started with advantage 1, advantage 2.
Yep. It was in my room. Robert just knocked it out of my bag last night. But you've already know.
How in the world? I think I lost it again. How in the world? It's all good, I'll figure it out. Oh, thank you.
You're mysterious man.
Okay. Sorry. We're good.
Right. All the judges good?
First off, city restriction or prohibitions and actions. The F is a reporting requirement shown in round 12. The definition of restriction not include reporting supervised black law defines restriction limitation but prohibit action conscious supervisor F. Opposite definition restriction very different because it was doing to supervised condition not agree. Restriction license restriction on authority distinct from conditions. Congress 78 interpreted conditions that imposed by plans for non-restriction limitation upon the authority to rather condition. The granting authority vote next first limits regulation oversight authority allows the lending new F and interior ground. Restriction ground is located next correct interpretation jacks all coordinates. That's because the act doesn't have to prevent anything. Next off is the ground that text United States federal judiciary to restrict the present target killing authority by requiring target killing operation be taken under agreed unspecified areas of Pakistan defense committee of the cabinet and judicial restrictions solved in executive compliance rather than more than 13 president filed judicial restrictions by the occurring the court because Bush was accepted executive obligation. Outside of the law with respect to president or church president power to switch to prospect there's reveal actually there's a big word to say a lot of areas president power might become regarding involvement in avoids politics steps in none of the administration might allow the court to make the classical allowing the court to deal with the administration laws will cover decision making about the court looking despite decision on sacred decision whether to spend capital on other policy priorities easier maintain the tax code next up the other kind of tax United States Congress should rescind all funding for targeted killing operations or not agreed upon any specified areas of the Pakistan Defense Committee having henceforth in the next comprehensive appropriation legislation passed by Congress can plan this appropriation jurisdiction can you break in House in 98 the of the U.S. the use of any offers and consent with the active effects of emergency powers of the war powers concerning my appropriation to protect that. The event of declared statutory restriction and the counterclaim reserves authority tailors 96. The first agency capacity to produce state authority has the power to give permission by the agency. But the things you can do so what can do what the agent may do and solves the case Fisher 97 Congress 11 President of Power Authority purposes made tax credit the action Congress use the power of the court restrict war power Congress the power of in the war Vietnam Congress the balls in terms of to make the president take approval of the Congress make the current resolution not subject to the correction resolution control the internal proceedings of Congress and avoids politics as bill or 8 the pregnancy acknowledges the interest of preventing the president from vetoing ever both pursuing the Pressiones they explain political occupation must give it on no station by the many bills appropriate to include unrelated prevention president which those political taxes the government driving the consideration president appears to Canada depending for on the overcoming and prevention next up is politics patent reform will pass BCT Correct 320 history well remember the president provided patent so say perfect storm reform bill and president strong lead on these issues this could be one of the largest emissions to play verbally make patent destroying threat Obama by first president elevate patent reform national issue senate is debating legislation playing cost capital and Neil 7 searching side political calculations passive pursuit defensive patent would be immediate cost but expenditure political government might be used for more passive presidencies fictional computation knowledge politics practical consideration over right constitutional principles capital key Heron 3 about the health passing innovation out of one black confident action on vacuum will help us with the situation across the bench line middle on set down present way and having brought up but be very helpful Obama some more great movement man those convince him I'll make your top on key to innovation good law 312 the credit is power economic security exponential increase of basic paths pursuing litigation driving our economy types innovation litigation use but on decrease new bank about actors director American innovation business one banker and other frivolous litigation one firm more patent litigation research money use the word from real innovation actors go to frivolous patent legislation bill help the inter-American economic innovation reform actions help to boost our patent system and great power war brew 9 strong economic performance foundation of power drawing into relations to innovation ability to state public economic type racial power protection measures military power balance of alteration productive balance of rising following brothers empires to cover major great power war show political consequences decline with being inability to sustain military power next up is midterms it says GOP won't retake the Senate now what says 3-8 but suspended competitive attend to go into Republican again against 6 states big leads in the state the Democrats Kentucky endorses the left state and they're moving low Republican legislature sabotage Republicans pick up Senate the question is well again where's that carries the 6 Republicans control Senate diversity in the legislature you talk about President war power traditions have a state Obama makes them look weak kills the Democrats in the midterms saw 13 of Obama this one now realized political rights of face because of the 2014 measures the Democrats will hit the panic button wounded Democrat president landing land back for Obama would be expected no vote by Congress for no matter truth that would be a huge political vote to Obama and that kills Obama's climate agenda hard to 13 several conservative Democrats have related fake tough competition instead of conflict Obama's struggle to worst outcome environmentalists for the Democratic control Senate against ever signed to Obama's climate change agenda that's also warming Martin 14 regular speed of climate and climate change rules into the greenhouse gas pollution of Obama's green cabinet also have the rest of 2015 the U.S. have the country phase deadline to leak money going to reducing carbon dioxide U.S. must lead by example to get China India Russia follow the only hope of that doing executive branch active by showing the mission change taken action extinction fluorine 12 potential for catastrophic climate change or rather wrong scientific data showing positive correlation to its right global temperature change wrong majority scientific community agreement without catastrophic climate change the rest of catastrophic climate change the extinction of human species now into the aggression of Obama circumvents the plan Loman 13 targeted claims requires not by operation and institutional covert acts of this mind blood lethal blind president turning oversight regulation provide president department not about Congress judicial oversight insufficient ability to check against second vaccines U.S. can't signal Zinco 13 social science research demonstrate cognitive advice by communication between states the United States signal never articulated procedures of people or estimate their ability to know what's and when to be safer to assume U.S. signals this or any kind of foreign officials taking the U.S. government for necessary to assume I made a peace domestic on this is no drones modeling Senators 13 the less maybe that drones could be effective without risking truth it seems less likely the other drones the U.S. side legal obviously 70s gets under required drones they measure the use of drones and power running road down attack with the fact that required powerful limits in the U.S. These provides a value different legal tendencies capabilities this is already having drone wars can't have in Lewis and Crawford 13 drones are very the fun way of defense signal under Russian most of interest so and government drones will limit utility traditional state God conflict acquisition takes forever Zinco 13 bets on current trends unlucky with intended target take out drones like Canada like the U.S. munition and builds the concerns on the question whether the state undertake investment required for arms drones and the near term no escalation to Armenia glass of 7 fortunes saying by Armenia force even the American military difficult time attacking Azerbaijan hard to swing military fire the United States too authoritarian my companies so participation sending militaries Azerbaijan likely to see placement consequently Moscow locate ever after conflict is resolved by diplomatic means no Israel strike Islami 13 if Israel going to attack Iran fantasy especially the new coalition war testifies over Israel before launching unilateral attack no it's attack territorial Iran Israel military intelligence team believe that strike on Iran by the bomb Israel will wait for sanctions Iranian decision makers war and initiating war leading intervention and won't escalate Rogan 12 is not its largest centralized retaliation that's going down and focused on minimizing negative consequences Israeli objectively clear limit and Iran understand initiating major war made and American intervention existential later right Iran's response to finally calibrated retaliation with the unlikely increase escalation escalated dynamically into war. No U.S.-China war. Alice in Black Hole 13 competition. Double conflict down the Cold War. China is attempting to turn down the training war struggle to subject to China need. U.S. market technology, student safety, core only becomes enemies all double weak cut off. There is no record of ideological common stability, factor attention requires cooperation, healthy competition for the identity military conflict. Well, China's leading on U.S. military is over one non-resistant pressure Taiwan. China do not want to clash China-Taiwan relations high now cold. Coalition in Taiwan trade that's ever been in normalization relation escalated. Dramatically visits Taiwan become routine. I know Chinese now study at American University Chinese tourism island boom Jordan exercises the coast guards have held every year now. The Sharif advanced SASCO drone policy stalls relations expert express times 3:25 the PM. Appreciate discontinuation drone types of Pakistan and U.S. and good coverage of Pakistan integrated security continues to work with a lot of that also sure Pakistan cooperation media energy news to country table engage focus on energy and bilateral relation to leaders of the firm continue to work with the PM also said and formal interactions with Obama and either a military and drone strikes in Neville Toronto Star 13 the Sharif had been that two drone strikes accused of military line back cooperation with the CIA whether the military stranglehold of defense policy being remains to be seen talking U.S. strikes out of the same sort of there's little strategic risk in Pakistan whether launch strikes and then they represent visible says against the Taliban that turns the entire advantage marquee 13 this would be painful as on bad Washington Pakistan will have to go believe that authors and and eliminate the veneer to protect themselves political fight also play Sharif's party black list out the Pakistan Taliban or B plan means that Pakistani ground troops are used instead undermines political stability and turns the case Russia 11 where there are no trends in Pakistan alternative would be full-fledged ground invasion elimination of military terror and unsupported collateral damage such invasion required greater will Pakistan and arbitrary far greater political repercussions and U.S. Pakistani difference in the Commission Kashmir bloc cooperation press trust of India 14 Pakistan will try the USA intervention in Kashmir U.S. officials and Kashmir policy has not changed and the government can destroy so the strict comment said that Kashmir legal country there is no question of interfering even though Pakistan said the U.S. intervenes in Washington repeatedly said India determined dialogue Pakistan economy find out AP14 the IMF said Pakistan's economy continually said the rise upward towards GDP for the Pakistan government to remain positive manufacturing continues to be stronger due using electricity towards the current government to remain strong commitment to economic reform support but security tries to know the economic development was better than expected shocks in Central Asia cause cooperation not escalation also takes out their Afghan impact calls in World War IV the unfriendly Central Asia feds to capture great powers behavior today there are some conceptual and special opportunities for cooperation to make your powers better and serve as a stabilizing force regions response to terror attacks increase cooperation destabilize China generally more about less cooperation one mention may reinforce all about positive developments of stability instability so structurally inevitable Boucher 6 Central Asia faces numerous threats to instability including Islamic extremism put Soviet like authoritarian to public perception and just high levels of corruption presented and authoritarian regime Jerkman standards Uzbekistan challenge are representing great region encourage reform and development to turn checks into pack war cons while nuclear weapons maintain peace Pakistan and the nuclear capacity to assure standing presuming intent to vendor range because of the fair after 2001 attack in India Parliament India mobilized attack on Pakistan Frankfurt and over real India rationalized and leading nuclear saying we might determine preventing nuclear war and no nuclear strike Ram 7 the Russian threatening the U.S. and it has been ever since the end of the Second World War and Russia not having to ideology military presence no threat growth Russian relations with their strategic arsenals under control threatening strike occurs zero probability drones don't kill U.S. Pakistan relations Curtis 13 U.S. need to keep a close eye on travel where their areas of the drone should continue to be a source of tension relation doubtful and along with derail ties anything else? Okay.
What's the status of both counterplans?
Status goes on.
Did the tuner get the judges to kick it for you?
Sure.
Okay. Net benefits to those counterplans?
Politics and just politics. Just politics.
Politics for both, and midterms is not a net benefit to either.
Nope. Yeah. Correct.
And you don't think Congress, or hold on. What is mutually exclusive between your appropriations counterplan and the plan?
The plan would have to restrict authority because authority implies a legal change.
And your counterplan isn't?
No, the counterplan is not a legal change. Funding appropriations just change the ability to get funding. That does not change the president's legal authority to
So it's just like, it just means that you can't target and kill in Pakistan, but it doesn't create any consultation mechanism to make sure.
It does create a consultation
How do you do that?
Because you rescind funding for all targeted killings that don't receive approval, which forces the executive to get that approval.
And so that's somehow not a restriction on his authority.
It's not a restriction.
It's
on
Congress
So that's
ending
kind of
funding and saying you have to get consultation. Obama's not going to be like,
I think
that's
That's kind of bullshit because the consultation mechanism doesn't exist in the status quo, and you have to force it to get created. And
he still has the authority to do drone strikes. Our evidence just indicates that he would do that consultation mechanism.
So he still has the authority.
So do you fiat the president to create that consultation?
I think this depends on what our definition of authority is.
No,
Our definition of authority is what legal.
Let me ask you a question. So, do you fiat the executive to create the consultation mechanism, or do you fiat the Congress to create the consultation mechanism, or do you fiat neither? Is that an effect of the
only
counterplan?
fiats the rescinding of all funding.
So you think it's an effect of the counterplan that the consultation mechanism is created? Now, the politics DA, when will the patent reform bill pass in the Senate?
Next week.
Next week. Which bill?
What's that?
Whose bill?
Whose bill?
Yeah.
It would be some merging of the two bills. Our evidence indicates that
Between
Obama
Goodlatte and Leahy?
What's that?
Between Goodlatte and Leahy?
Our evidence indicates that it would be that Obama's political capital allowed for it to have one amendment.
That's totally different from the House bill, though.
What's that?
That's totally different
Yeah,
from the
political
House.
capital is key to hedge out the difference between the two bills.
Oh, okay, so when will that pass?
What's that?
When will that pass?
I mean, we can read evidence on
Okay,
this
you don't
later,
know.
but it'll
So
be
why is
early
political
April.
capital key to get it done? The only newest evidence that any team in the nation has cut is from this staff writer from Wired.com. And he doesn't have a reason for why it will pass besides like Obama is
There
a
are
patent
pattern
troll
evidence
killer.
indicates that Obama's support created momentum in the House and is currently convincing Democratic
Okay, I mean,
lawmakers
that's
to get on
supposed like
board.
you don't have any. What evidence is that?
That's our
The
pattern
Haddon's
refund
evidence,
evidence.
the Haddon evidence,
It
all
just-
say political capital is key to that
And you
momentum.
can't explain why it will pass though. Right? Like
I just explained why.
because
Because it's key to getting Democrats
and
on
a
board.
I
plan.
mean, if you want to just challenge like general political capital theory,
I mean,
that's fine.
but it's like it's not in the context of patent reforms. Who
It
switches
is,
votes?
dude, you're missing the fact that we
I-
write two uniqueness cards in the one
I
hit
have another
state.
question. Who switches votes as a result of in the midterms? Who switches votes?
Who switches votes?
Right.
People who are currently voting for the Democrats.
So like young urban kids who vote for the Democrats all
It's
the time.
not
are gonna
about
switch
that.
their
It's a
votes.
question of, so we'll read evidence on this, but midterms are a referendum on Obama's popularity, and the plan would wreck that because it makes him
Hold on, I'm not taking prep, but I'm gonna. I have an app that keeps track of their votes. What else? I'll start.
Oh, look at that.
Thank you so much.
You have an app that does what?
It should. I'm just going to keep track of my own votes. Okay, I started then.
I know if you need it or not. You might not. But it also proves like but you can put that in the tab. I like that. Okay. Just to make sure, when you say the military means drone strikes,
Oh, we'll keep.
when the military means drone strikes are enough, is it because of the U.S. military drone strikes are enough, or is it because of Pakistan?
Pakistan.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, 806.
I'm trying to make sure that that's what it was. That's our art.
Yeah. I know.
Are you stuck with?
Yeah.
Okay. How much do you have?
We have 806. The service stays this internet. It's gonna, so same case order, then topicality. So U.S. aggression infantry. And then, did you pull the 2 from there? I didn't pull up the 2.
Like, you set it up.
Should be zero. Then it'll go the judicial counter plan, the appropriations counter plan, the patent reform dissent, and the midterms dissent. Yeah. U.S. aggression, Sharif, topicality, the judicial counter plan, the appropriations counter plan, and then patents in the midterm. Alright. Do y'all have the speech done?
I can hear himself. Right? Yes.
Okay. Is there anyone not ready?
They say circumvention 3 arguments. 1, our evidence indicates that Obama is not tracking the status quo that disproves the initiative that he would. Second, all of our evidence indicates that they would say yes, which means that there's no motive to circumvent because the consultation process would solve. Third is that he strictly adheres to Congress. This is ultimate. And 12, Obama decision to kill all He did not rely on authority, rather authority that Congress gave to all major military targets prevented by executive lawyers, commanders, and witnesses and legal considerations. Obama policymakers, lawyers seriously grapple with the legal limits of their authority as they're constrained who they target. The executive branch only targets them that fall within the parameters set by Congress until the Congress is the president targeted required change. The current system set by constitutional requirements. Congress could divide the scheme, but show no inclination to. Now the plan does all the signal evidence indicates that the signal of the United States plan would create a statutory roadmap. That's some actual evidence that would be able to scale up, and that's all their evidence is about. Nations building drones. Yes, they may build drones, but our evidence is that they would be able to violate sovereignty, which is what would cause escalation. That is what the plan signal solves. Robinson 13, what goes on discussed watching the code sounds with determine without a created globally relevant standard, even without right demonstration of timing of drone specific legislation, just the process of U.S. policy. With the U.S. to go a long way toward establishing President of America, providing hope and arguing against another action norms established by the other countries, even without the legal agreements that shows that's containing weapons, including landmines, violent leaders for nuclear bombs, or significant legal regimes of the behavior of the United States. So that means that they are rapidly evolving. Our evidence is way better. First, media on evidence and other impacts is about the drone evidence. Our evidence indicates that that causes a miscalculation, which draws in Israel and Iran, not that they strike each other, which causes extinction. Second, it's a really evidence and other impact is about drones. And this South China Sea was the reason why it causes extinction on miscalculation. Go the truth, the legitimacy advantage. The squad is not solving. Their evidence is not as good as our government evidence indicates that even stopping is not good. They need a consultative process to be able to solve that. Is also the hardy, the juicy evidence in the military argument. We solve this because the DCC consults the military, which is what their evidence is about, and they would say yes, which is the reason why this solves all the Pakistan military is good with the United States assistance to Boston 12 military action to resolve terrorism. This time, U.S. support realities, domestic police, one of the best without terrorism, and crucial to save reform reform, and several best without police rules like individual police force, one institutional internal reforms underway. This needs support of balance person likely help Pakistan tackle challenges, international help, and probably state role enhancing capacity, access law enforcement structure. Also, our evidence indicates future predictive con will destroy his legitimacy, even if right now, which means that it's telling the status quo, it doesn't matter now, it's not stable. Our evidence indicates that it's collapsing the political will necessary for him to be able to create energy referendums. They don't have the impact to energy wars, which is the reason it's why our Central Asia is going to cause extinction. Now, Pakistan collapse galvanizes India into action. That's the reason when it causes extinction. It's not that they attack each other. And drones are killing relations. Our evidence is better. Now go to top gallery. We need the plan prohibits any drones that are taken outside consultation process and check the 11 requirement president short state because the only way to limit authority procedure chance to require affirmative action can contribute. Also, counter interpretation restriction is limitation, not prohibition. CSC and drug procedure limitation qualification meaning restriction to degree control on short prohibited the usual wording making the phrase does not authorize birth and now give all affirmative flexibility, especially the entities that circumvent sale debates from the circumventing the thing neg grounds like circumvention and ESR mean that we have to be innovative, otherwise we'll lose aid ass is the back on playground reasonability. Don't vote negative because they have a better interpretation for debate. Next, I'll go to the counter plan. It obviously doesn't solve. It does not create a consultative process. It doesn't have Congress do that, or it just bans those that aren't. It doesn't actually set one up, which is the reason why it's not able to solve our web evidence web. And 13, the fundamental I think Congress gave fundamental question to decide the inaction of congressional leaders constitute trouble. President Obama established the authority president intervene virtually without the consent of Congress and not was emergency security procedural liberation when it comes to terms of the international arena cannot be complicated process. The international community will another American not really actual discretion when individual Congress having their finger on the triggers necessary to solve the woods and Trump indeed Obama vaccines by law about calling the new information maybe or you look at executive power there's only single process to give Congress the power issues. We do not need to go through a worldly name is estimated to for the Congress to let's see the declaration of war saying the United States authorized people more authority or courtesy Washington diverse courts to make leadership reputation to both permutation to the counterplan. The net result of the counterplan would be the reason why justify the counterplan links to politics and drains to the solicitor capital journals fee capital it spills over Wolfart the 90 CG represents the most important list of literature not policy and offered by advocating the executive which is doing capital CG so that capital jeopardize the reciprocity of the court is interfering with the artifice marked office and asking warming and pollution C-smart rulings to key Afghan 12 9-smart order from there with 400 deaths permanent reduction in coal and other possible including crucial finally the global warming the global answer the chance to establish private laws warming everything to do with federal government flexibility and not conditions going issue cause argument responsibility kill 2 time strategy which is the last chance for offense and kills decision making skills, interpretation of their life, what conditional accuracy that's necessary to solve, and Judge Cake is obviously independent voting achievements. The affirmative has to debate two worlds, which makes debate possible. Congress can yourself everything, geometry, everything, and every possible equation, early computer residential, the word determining the rules, assassination, increase, requiring for to educate, striking, over level, to understand, agree with thing, calls this war, justice, the work, everything, you have power, everything, and you disaster, saving, and all everything in the way of things, and you should agree with others, or maintenance on dynamics. Now, the plan is to prevent NATO collapse, Parker, and Trump, the United States, and the land of the UAV, destroyed with the United States and all the Hardy guys, European, which are trade cooperation, march cooperation, NATO plans war, since the United States of the United States capability to work together, when it is incompetence, and NATO vicinity with the war disputes on risk, maybe the necessity, weapons of mass destruction, mark to what weapons of mass destruction go to the appropriations counterplan. This is, and the judicial counterplan would obviously link to midterms because it was still its capital, and they conceded links to politics to sad because it would cost the Solicitor General not go to the appropriations counterplan permutation to do a permutation to the counterplan. This is an end result of the affirmative is for Congress to enact power first, which means that this doesn't exclude any part of the affirmative, which reason is why it justifies permutation to the counterplan. Now, it doesn't create a regime, it only ends Congress funding. It doesn't actually have Congress create an executive, and if it does, it's the executive that creates it, which are weapons syndicates. That's not non-binding. Funding cuts are restrictions, which is the reason why links, cons, and 11 Congress didn't heavily vote to spend power within restriction on military engagement. Some of the restriction left the president consider restriction. All of those are not. These funding restrictions have been justified on the grounds of congressional power over spending mark at spending. Now, U.S. targeted killing causes to collapse, fire break on into preventative self-defense. Fiscal 13 in order to prevent subject cast in the emulation, not to search and right. Preventative administration away from the United States using joint funding strategy, declining strategy, prevent self-defense. UAVs are killing, shoot, continue to plan, or nuclear war preventive self-defense causes nuclear war. Column 13 actions for use of self-away contemporary law, WD, resolution, knowledge of the war, be on a temporary possibility for war, instability, weapons of gone for greater mistrust, but there is a greater degree of mistrust now. Also, and that's fine. Yeah, patent reform not going to pass now. It's delayed grounded on for 328. The committee delayed patent reform until at least after the August and the anti-government award April slow. They passed it over the action endorsements to pay. And political party patents also, it's not going to pass now. It's not going to solve any litigation explosion. It's not unique. Merit at 312. Data to more going to raise the State 70 papers. See the patent not going to use. Not going to place it in role. It's you studied the director of nurse with the Senate. I don't believe the problem about the evidence that they were relying on you to rise the big problem. According to the GSC, the Republic's lack of analysis of the 12 patent means analysis and again regardless of litigation lawsuit. And opponents are 89% to suggest the correct idea that running loud the time about it will be the site. Not be outside mean there's no debate in Congress that there's no political repercussion. Losers don't lose. Butler and for 13 special Lawrence City General Awards. These are to do number one suggestions of political report meetings. The member of Congress be the narrative you agree. The whoever played the city of one would become a link to gloomy materials of losing news of the outcome of the vote is saving the problem. Completely the party's not any choice of only from you. Or no matter Republican side is usually we like the vote of Republicans to Congress. And all be resolved against also the DS is an intrinsic logical policymaker be able to do both. And Obama's week now watching post 327 the Second Partisan Post of foreign policy that has a link to be reposed to their vote representatively when it comes to foreign policy. IMF Thomas Weisman and 3 to Republican Jew John performing the Obama University Obama the payment of the article to Ukraine and the United States of democracy. The secret step for Obama the are angry disappointed also economic collapse and inequality 5 times 311 and disaster recovery of the United States for providing the our possible part of the problem we have used to revealing the search security it's going to collapse market collapse no impact to the plan is key to Obama's popularity he wins if he loses top 10 of 13 Obama wins if he loses upholds the principle without any the Christ number one against Obama circuit depends on even popular things that will describably actually help the president and getting now also sequestration thumbs the argument that this is a life where 13 sequestration on critical American power result like a dangerous and revolved in adversary also all causes overwhelm more Jimmy's resilient complete 12 and no impact the United States 90 signs of recovery the strategic installation manufacturing science technology needs to design product needs to be recovered not use the US dollars and the global needs outside and the increase in the United States budget when you see the economy of region back to the boundaries of the GOP policy and meaningful recovery also the political capitals are relevant and impossible to quantify their evidence to my hacks go to the midterms to set GOP win on the 13 the last day of back in the sky down to the challenge and the top of the side challenge our border on this video opportunity for Republicans to extend on be but the things are to see the Republicans $40 million with around $7 million Obama reporting for 1% with reason to regard the World War II the metric been one of the most aggravated minimum result money and 50% rebel historical choice record data the president's party to 6 million 50 years Clinton is reporting the not charge on the party ever get Republican zero charging certain Republicans are getting the death also now the plan is key to Obama's popularity GOP would push the plan to get the win Howell and 7.5% competition apparent sort of the disaster with lawmakers opposed president called the opposition party to the constitution of opportunity military venture with the opposition party with number 6 members of that challenge Congress 7 the president how he goes along with the White House plan boosts Obama and Jim's GOP cast himself onto here Warner 7 president 12 president and more policy especially future challenges president foreign policy risky Congress with the power rather than losing election members low down to the US along like the green the rarely from the side of the Congress that has installed onto here defense is going to be like incumbent what this government has such election and their link is irrelevant not a referendum on Obama empirically evidence indicates that they distancing silly stuff and 2 Democrats who distance from the president putting aside then people like Breyer to run their bands or another than right down national one they want to know they're going to try to race and now there's no impact to the warming it's not rapid McGrath and 13 race and down warming not leaving rapid since 1998 it stands those United States that would reduce warming extreme production likely so I'm considering your Elijah is less consistent and the best they also be adapt Mendelson and I the secretary of environment studies the emission likely consequences of your impact with regard to centuries with the effects will never occur because people adapt to varying community policies to build short long-term interests also it's inevitable in the United States as a soft growth and 13 emission the United States Supreme Commission for the Congress of the Church of the Abraham, the Minister of Revenue, the Expression of the last thing to the United States and the Georgia, the Second President, the Chief, the Straight of Line, the Belgian levels of all that will embrace the United States and produce a government that's been going on on global office of 2017 global rise of the world, prime very energy because discovered in the US overproduces every time the global market. Also, no internally, we never got anything. What?
Anything done on emissions?
Yeah, we never got anything done on emissions. Gridlock means that it's not going to be able to solve no matter what the outcome is.
We'll do some.
I read both. I read all three. All three.
150. First, in case you made the argument that there would be a drone war in Azerbaijan, which means that Israel and Iran get involved, but one does not strike the other. How do Israel and Iran go to war if one does not strike the other?
It indicates our evidence is fantastic. The Armenia.
Your impact evidence is not.
No,
so
the Clayton
please give yourself
evidence is like the best card I've cut this year. It's like way too good. It says that Armenia and Azerbaijan, Armenia is getting drones from Israel, Azerbaijan is getting drones from Iran. Our evidence indicates security commitments mean that when they go to
So they're
war,
buying drones from each other, which means
No, they're buying each other from like the opposite sides. It says this creates a security commitment trap that ensures that when Armenia and Azerbaijan go to war, Israel would attack Armenia and Iran would attack Azerbaijan, and it would be a conflation pattern. So your evidence
Your
is like
impact evidence is talking about when Israel first strikes Iran.
your
so
evidence.
it doesn't apply.
No. Yes,
That's what the
that's-
evidence is talking
That is the
about.
terminal impact into escalation.
Alright, that's
Yes,
fine.
but your impact is into our internal link. It says
circumvention.
Israel's not going to
So-
first strike Iran. That's not how that war
Okay,
happens. Is
thanks,
our
Lee.
argument.
Circumvention. So Pakistan green lights all these drone strikes.
Yes.
So it doesn't result in less drone strikes. The plan doesn't.
Well, that's not a mandate of the plan. And the topic also doesn't say that.
No, I'm just asking for like questions of solvency. The plan does not result in less drone strikes.
If they
It's
say
a
yes.
mandate of the plan, no. It's a consultative process. We read evidence.
All right,
It
that's
says
fine.
that
Your Goodman
it's
evidence
yes.
indicates that there's no question of Pakistan requesting the U.S. We want complete stop. Why doesn't that mean that your plan doesn't solve the advantage?
They want a complete stop of unilateral strikes.
I don't think that's what it says. Pakistan requesting the U.S. to cut down on the number of strikes. Our position has been clear. We
Yes,
want a
our
complete
position-
stop, saying that there should not be any more strikes.
Yes,
Why do you solve the
unilateral.
advantage?
This is like not a debate we're going to lose. The evidence is fantastically overwhelmingly affirmative. They hate unilateral strikes. Period. The end. Our evidence indicates that they actually hate the TPP and the Waziristan region, and they like drone strikes that happen there. They just hate it when the United States violates their sovereignty in doing that. You don't have a piece of evidence
That's
that says
fine.
they want an end to all drone strikes. We have evidence that says they hate unilateral strikes.
Okay, that's fine. Counterplan. So your piece of evidence indicates something about the tension. Can you explain to me what this card says?
The which
Appropriations
counterplan?
counterplan?
Which counterplan?
Haynes evidence on the appropriations counterplan.
Okay, the Haynes evidence says that the act of removing the power of the purse is a restriction on the war power authority. of the
Where does this
president.
card say authority? Show me where this card
President's
says authority.
war-making powers?
There's a difference
That's
between
close
war-making
enough.
powers and the
That's-
plan removing
The
authority, which is
president's
what the
war-making powers, are you saying that's not synonymous with authority? Come
Yes.
on. Wow, give me a break. This is a joke.
I'm not going to
The
give you a
president's-
break because competition is based off the
You're-
word authority. Where does
No.
this card say that?
You're okay. Look, this card says that it ejects his war-making power.
I'm sorry,
authority.
your card isn't
Your
like as good as you
links
think
to
it
the
is.
disads do not say the word authority. They
They
are
do say the
all
word authority.
about war-making power decisions.
No, they're all about authority.
This is a silly Michigan State style debate where you make contrived analytics that are actually not real world. This card's good enough.
Right. 950. Real quick, politics theory, fiat self-link and non-intrinsic.
Just throw it. Just throw it. Just get rid of it. It's too. It's on. It's law. just sent Doc with marks and cards I didn't read. That work is good enough, but fight up. This is yours.
Just to clarify, the card you tagged as Obama Week now is Washington Post. The
Yeah.
card that you read is.
Oh, okay. This is remarked.
It's sent out to you, should have it. It's going to be the court counterplan, the funding counterplan, then the aggression advantage, and then the Sharif advantage.
Yeah, one more time.
Court counterplan, the power of the purse counterplan, the aggression advantage, and the Sharif advantage. Everyone good? Court we're not going for concede permutation to but explicitly concede their weapon with evidence. Weapon evidence just as congressional inaction is bad, and that is Congress needs to be involved in order to solve the perception, which proves the power of the person is sufficient to solve their whatever. It just says Congress needs to be involved in the process. They are the world accountable because they establish a restriction funding that dictates what the person has to do in order to strike in Pakistan, which is the same as the plain text. The plain text only says you have to require Pakistan say yes. The Kaplan forces Obama to get approval if he wants to strike in Pakistan because he gets no funds if he does not consult with the Pakistani Defense Cabinet in the same way the plan does. The one he sees is all about how Obama wants to use it, which proves even just doing the same way as the plan. The plan text does not mandate that Obama goes to them, which means there is no difference between the Kaplan and plan. Now, the conditionality, the big conditionality, our contribution that gives you conditional options, status quo, team negative flexibility, options, just topic, the base, topic, the base, speaks for slots, make sure you have to test the after modeling, because you strategic thing, and first you have to choose the best arguments that, because it's really to education is the only law, education begin debates, use, and about faster, more experienced teams, more arguments, like key theory means there's always some skin that strategy, the way you see checks, negation theory means we're always saying the average best, so they built it up, it's not made, so the way you have to get diversity of education, only conditional, let's say, this the policy, critical arguments, that's key, testing, implementation, assumptions, real world policymakers have to construct multiple alternative scenario, debate the one options, opportunity, the 200 checks, and get the full 2 year answer, whatever we go for all this is often against their judgment, argument, even if their judgment argument is just a reason to, it's not reasonable against, it's just a reason to reject, judge taking, just fine with the Kaplan, and the Kaplan, the dissent, now the add-ons, or grouping add-ons really terrible, the Shabbat is just as against deliberation of all, but it does not make a spillover claim to all groupthink, all groupthink deliberation, just as deliberation and targeted claim, which means it can't solve, and intelligent agencies, norms of conduct, exacerbate executive secrecy, makes groupthink unavoidable, should protect, the abuse overclassifies, scientific psychology, responsibility, groupthink, reverses overclassifying, and make theirs, the process, to ensure skepticism of a decision, impose security, national security officials, be strong, essential with all information, Obama solves groupthink, Kennedy, Philip Obama practice, held counter, groupthink, these British moderate code, says Obama said the team is members evaluate all possibilities, roles, critical, labor, Sunday, each member partiality, outside constitution, trust, outside, they were seeking, obedience from the outside, Obama received the last chance, meeting before, additional truth against the power person, Kaplan obviously solves this because it's Congress involved, there's no distinction in the severance between the plans, mechanism, the Kaplan's mechanism, now the NATO add-on, the Kaplan also solves this obviously because it gets Congress involved, all these are just Congress involvement add-ons, but there's no distinction about the process of the plan B, the counterplan, and Ally Terror Co-op is high now, Eric, 13th September, the EU made approved, until co-op with the US September, ready to growing co-op, was the long strategy co-op, was a new to make US-EU relation, foster the protection, most new development partnership, positive two-side agreement, human work together, US and EU, adopt the new declaration, seeking into DB, already close relationship, NATO fails, Hawkins 9, the administration should be most of everything really used, relationship, by to be aligned to the user, addressing, the rock is the advocates, only cooperated attention, now receive 21st century, exclusively give life behind, news and scripts, blood out the another, news and scripts, framed to the right, for these kinds of cross-name expansions, exploit the aggressive nationalism, conservatism, subpoena their Russian fuel, arms race, economic security, threat, European Union, current condition, European Union, South European Union, international negotiations with Iran, help bring about peace and revolution, Ukraine's revolution, race, peace, peace can be true, some others, caucuses, great success by far has been, who stabilized the Western Balkans, now the funding, the capital itself, 100% of the case, rescinds all funding for everything, the plan which stops the president, no longer can use TK in Pakistan unless he gains the support of the Pakistan Defense Committee, sufficiency, how should be the capital is sufficient to solve most of the internal links, the way he doesn't have to solve all of them, because solving one internal link is sufficient to solve the advantage, you should view the capital versus status quo, not the capital, you should view the capital versus status quo, not the plan, other countries perceive the capital versus status quo, including Germany, so that is the extent to which you should view the capital, because it sends the same signal as the plan, it solves U.S. aggression, there are intel evidence that the U.S. is violating Pakistan's sovereignty right now, because they don't seek consent, the plan forces them to get consent, and the capital does as well, which means it's sufficient, the Rogers evidence just says you have to change the unwilling or unable standards, the plan counter says that same thing, because it requires that the president go seek congressional approval first, it's about targeted killing unable or willing states, or Dean evidence is about resolving executive uncertainty, the capital does that by setting a strict standard through funding appropriations, or second advantage, or Goodman evidence says the Sharif wants to freeze the capital sufficiently, does and the Reichman evidence is just another piece of evidence, resolves the evidence first, this solves every part of the app because it functionally does the same thing as the plan, it makes it clear that the plan's policy, the only difference is the capital maintains legal authority with the president, but there's zero solvency deficit because the capital grants the exercise of authority, they have not made a solvency deficit argument, they have not read a piece of evidence why the power of the purse is ineffective, they conceded one and C. Fisher says the power of the purse is empirically the most effective method at solving war powers because Congress can restrict all four sources of executive funding, which means he can't strike in Pakistan absent getting Pakistani approval in the first place. The best method, Devin, is that the power purse large the power place outside the executive power, maybe most effective weapon. The power is most significant check the executive power, legislative laws, access to pocket the budgetary rules, clearly subordinate Congress, there is funding laws, establish parameters, once Congress makes the ultimate decision, I'll say permutation, do both the links of politics as Congress pass separate legislation restricting executive war powers authority that triggers a battle because the president has more leverage to veto with independent legislation. I'll get to that more in the voice politics debate, but I think they really messed up the trick with the counterpolitics on permutation due the counterplan. The permutation is severance. Two reasons. First, it severs statutory restriction. Conceded argument in the 2EC. The counterplan is an example of an appropriations restriction, which is distinct from a statutory restriction. That's Reagan hence used per because topic specific and clearly distinction too. Funding cuts are distinct. Legal stand. Fingers, Congress promise deep cuts federal funding for legal service providing statutory restriction. The word of legal service providers provide it's distinct. LCL 13 report begins by discussing Congress provisional allocating workers between Congress and the president. It considers Congress the constitutional authority via statutory command or through funding limitations. The report discusses Congress ability to limit funding as possible alternatives of a second. It severs war powers authority. The capital counterplan preserves war powers authority. The plan restricts authorities the permission given to an agent, i.e. what an actor may do. The powers given is an agent's capacity to produce change, i.e. what an actor can do. The counterplan prevents the exercise of authority by restricting what the president can do. The counterplan doesn't change what the president may do because he can still legally do it. He just doesn't have the funds. The counterplan maintains authority contextual. Ed Martinez told the Constitution restores all Congress to express appropriate funds. Congress can use the appropriation funds to cut off funds for ongoing war. Clause where the bargain the Commission of Power implies right to specify appropriate money should be spent, but also the duty to appropriate funds for activities within the independent constitutional authority of other branches, and authority is distinct from exercise of power. We're still seen by the distinct difference between legal authority and ability to actually exercise power. Authority is not effective power is important for legal scholars to decide who has formal authority. We must consider not only weapons each branch, but their ability to use those weapons. It's the allocation of decision rights. The counterplan changes funding, not the right to decide. Garfini, to organization, change or internal allocation of authority. The organization only do an attendee allocation of decision rights, i.e. authority severance of the voter makes the move target makes it possible for the neck to have stable government shifting labor debates. They destroy legal precision about agency implementation of key topic education ability to test statutory restrictions of war powers. Authority should the counterplan will be perceived internationally as a credible commitment. News to be and you say the Congress participation was part of a serious single so by the U.S. purchase manipulate equal willing crisis. The nation international history may come to an agreement. They can credibly commit to implement the agreement because nations have instead of issue Congress should participate in private means provision meaningful commitment for example legislation eliminate funding secret legislative cooperation with running will generate the lead to greater stability. Counterplan sends a stronger signal forward on something to review this practice of power of the purse. This perhaps the most important weapon in the legislative possessing reform limitations that will become a law debating your precedents as such much against some unmistakable single use Congress able to signals globally clarity with regard to American military deployment signals which should be no small way disengagement of U.S. forces. We have specifically targeted killing Sovereignty 13 there better emergency drone taxing to be employed legislative the proper right to review the judgment of the administration tactics operating strategies the legislative which is done to a prior conflict that holds the power of the first Congress could cease Congress could cease funding and then they make an argument we don't create a regime so this was all done in the over now the links to politics argument the counterplan avoids politics the appropriations process changes the president's political calculations he won't expend political capital to fight to and veto the bill because the counterplan text specifies it's passed in a comprehensive appropriations bill which changes that political calculation because when it's in a comprehensive appropriations bill he can't veto specific parts of it you have to veto the whole thing that changes his political calculations it means he would not want to fight because he would lose all political influence and to make him look weak that's one see expular evidence the political links are all or nothing they come in degrees if we win the counterplan solves the case and avoids more of a link than the plan default to an offensive and spare time in voting there's a link differential later trade Congress could exercise his constitutional powers every exercise would be more practical politically and properly putting up funds and avoids politics presidents will avoid funding broad appropriation legislation he forsakes for technical reasons the president merely applies constitutional provision rather than lock himself in the express clear stance presidents may not want to make a commitment to veto any vote defines as a disadvantage business may comply with the writer to mollify congressional critics complies now with the writer would have benefits keep restricted Congress on board with aspects that are not resolved by the writers of their evidence is just in the context of is just in the context of attention doesn't even say it's unpopular it doesn't even mention the words war powers authority it's just as presidential discretion which obviously why the reason is really shitty now the aggression of it now the actually go back answer the add-on here drones are not key there. Golem is 13. You holds American intervention, Afghanistan, Iraq, fulfill the criteria necessary proportionality, abilities, network potential units, enemies evolving, also in transactional moves, spread the other anticipatory modes interesting modes of use first also the counterplan obviously sufficiency also because it sets the same standards on the aggression advantage. There's no impact also which undergo self evidence indicates that Armenian copies don't actually escalate or draw great powers like Russia. Russia, the US is greatly proven by the last 20 years. There's no Israeli strike acquisition or involvement with Iran or Israel. Rogue and there's no escalation even if they attack each other. It's not in their interest aspect because they don't want to destroy each other countries. Meaning what an aspect. There's no impact to U.S. China. We're also in a case China wants to co-op with the U.S. and they co-op with the U.S. and status quo and doesn't want to escalate. Where they've also seen the cold indicates Taiwan kind of relations are high in the status quo, which means there's no reason they would use drones out the Sharif invasion. So they could see the Pakistani economy is fine. The status quo that takes on the internal link to that takes on the internal link. The Indo-Pakistan deterrent strikes or con evidence indicates that Indo-Pakistan would never want to get into war because they don't just destroy each other countries if they fight each other nuclear arsenals, which means there's no scenario where nuclear power figure agreement is also takes up the Russia. Actually, yeah. I think so.
Yeah. All right. The plan text. The United States Congress should restrict the president's targeted killing authority by requiring that targeted killing operations be taken under agreed upon specific areas with the Pakistan DCC. So the affirmative is a positive act that requires that targeted killing operations be taken. Now the counterplan text. The United States Congress should rescind all funding for targeted killing operations that are not agreed upon specific areas with the DCC, henceforth in the next comprehensive appropriation legislation. Who creates the consultative process?
So here's the thing. So the plan text says that it requires that approval in the same way the counterplan would have, the only way he would be able to strike and get
This
access.
is a simple question.
I'm trying to answer your question if you want me to answer it. The counterplan says that if you don't have the funding, you don't get access to have those strikes.
Who creates the consultative process with the DCC?
I don't think the plan text.
The plan text says Congress, by requiring that targeted killing operations,
requiring doesn't mean there's like creating.
So
a
it
consultative process.
Okay.
It
That's
means
your
that Obama
argument.
has to go.
So
and
let me get
consult
this
them,
straight.
the same way the
So let me get this straight. This is a new argument in cross-ex. Your argument is that the act doesn't create a DCC and neither does the counterplan.
Our argument is that the plan text mandates that Obama has to go to the DCC in the same way.
Are you going to answer the
force
question?
him to go to
Who
the
in
DCC?
the world of the counterplan consults the DCC? Is it the president or Congress?
I think it could be both.
It could be both.
Yeah.
Great. That's an amazing, intelligent answer. What does the counterplan restrict?
Well, the counterplan restricts his ability to gain access funding.
Ability to gain access funding.
He can't have any funds to use.
That's what it restricts? His ability to access funding. Okay, cool. What part of the act does the counterplan exclude?
It excludes war powers, authority, and statutory restriction.
War power authority. What's a statutory restriction?
Well, we've read pieces of evidence indicates there's a distinction between.
I understand. I understand your
funding.
evidence is like he did a statutory restriction and removed funding. I don't think that has the intent to define.
No,
What's a statutory restriction?
I think our statutory restriction is when Congress passes a specific legislation not related to funding.
Is there a card that says that, or is that
We've
just
read
you
pieces of
crossing?
evidence in the context of the topic.
Hold on. Is there a card that
distinguishes
says
the
that,
two.
or is this you just asserting that?
We've read multiple pieces of evidence.
I know you've read evidence. I
The
think
one
they're
that
bad.
says appropriation.
Okay, last question. Authority. So the counterplan doesn't restrict his authority. That's the whole competition thing.
That's one of them.
The web evidence says Obama has established the authority of the president to intervene anywhere without the consent of Congress. If it doesn't restrict his authority, how does it solve any of the drone aggression advantage that says it's the authority precedent? Hold on, I haven't finished my question. That says it's the authority precedent of the president and the Dean evidence that autocrats can model.
Yeah, I think that web evidence is throwing out the phrase authority without the legal precision of the distinction
this
we're
is
talking
the Dean
about.
evidence I'm
Obviously,
talking
we
about.
stopped those drone strikes without consultation. That
But
resolved.
he
like, a
still
majority
has
of
the
your
authority,
complaints.
so autocrats can still model autocratic authority without Congress consent.
No, because the policy
So-
of the U.S. is that he can't do it without the approval of the Pakistani government.
Alright, I just sent it out. It's going to be the Sharif advantage in politics. Second part. Alright, it's going to be midterm Sharif politics. That was 3 seconds. Okay.
The term Sharif law?
Yeah. Is everyone good?
Midterms we're not going for, we'll concede other countries key. Some global warming takes out their hat on the counterplay now. The Sharif advantage, now the Sharif advantage, great evidence indicates no Russian war because the nuclear arsenal state in the US, US and Russia have ties, which means that they have no incentive to first strike us or escalate tensions also. There's no scenario for such a laser war calls, what forth evidence indicates that such called cooperation because they want to stabilize the region because it's on more resources having no reason than any country would want to escalate the way, escalate the conflict now. The politics is that they have conceded the impact to Germany magnitude, this that outweighs magnitude clouds of German country transition wars escalated conflict cause and presence of evidence solves the case of Germany provides effective global to our countries less likely start so we effectively protect our conflicts do not start military superior or guarantee no escalation to the impact turns the case impact turns to drones impact cause other evidence the two impact scenarios predicated off of the country fighting against anyone want to do that if we have a Germany turns the other advantage too because if we have if we have things like global credibility that means we can de-escalate these conflicts and allow for things like a stable withdrawal and allow for cooperation and centralization because we are more powerful and we can force cooperation now. They say won't pass way, pattern for won't pass, Obama pushing in. Become a strong leader on that issue. House passed legislation, Senate debating it. That's one seat private and will pass. Now continue to push key to getting across the finish line. Record 327. Here's the committee plan to move forward. Pattern performance students that we send to respect some of the Congress. A lot of best plans to zero bomb. Pattern performance state of the union. Going to respect off this way. Reports mentioning you like the air policy got to blow not. Finish line. We're close to get down to the nation. Keep our nose. The ground so then momentum. Obama switch all 323. Abundant growing and watching beyond Africa. Patrol Obama. Issue executive action. When independent fine performance state of the union. House. Question about the travel by spending and send top of Virginia close to coming. Maconia and below 318. Congress on the first passing line. Legislative bills alleviate trying to control. Probably Congress and the rest of the pattern reform legislation and parliamentary. American bipartisan support building U.S. official news 305-15. You don't let push effort leads to lose take up legislative by bar coalition Republicans Democrats in a wide sort of large bipartisan interest and take pattern from the curse and official the one path forward just in case I've got moved to April 3rd which is in 3 days in case you forgot PC means you'll be able to get this done quicker. This is also more this evidence also provides a framing issue for this which means that it's true that it's coming to the agenda in 3 days and each political capital is necessary now, which means that there's only the rest of the plan prevents that they say no explosion now and won't. They say no explosion now and it's not unique but Pantrol's crush growth and tax reform is key to solve strong team Pantrol's on actually producing an I took someone else that did last year the past 2 years kind of 62% PA this start about the new recommendation plan and the very short size of PA instead of start this month's pitch starts on one litigation that will go prior to make it harder to be a Pantrol also wants the evidence indicate that they are impeding innovation now there's only risk that this I can't resolve that sufficient solve even trolling doesn't enable in 3 of 13 the central and growth and increase risk of constitutional landscape change the program kind of technical recovering dying legal change lowers bar defense one getting up fight back and speak down and solves all the components of the patent problem grade 13 performance center on neutral performance center on the drug bill party actually be a figure on the prime networks functional overthrow the government turning the most innovative parts of our comment they say fiat self-selling they say fiat self-selling first this is a voting issue on educational details of an enactment on part it's also not real world there's no bouncing model nothing passes instantly encourages ground politics is at core offense on this topic in our interpretation pen pass immediately through normal political process this also makes the link force because it causes Obama to still fight it because that's his argument they say losers don't lose they miss the vote on the link debate once the O'Neill evidence indicates that if it's a question of authority then Obama will fight the plan they have no evidence or no 2AC response that is about this out about Obama fighting the plan because it removes his authority once the O'Neill evidence political experts indicate that happens when it's a question of authority that happens which to the link difference on the counter plan and the choice which means I don't have to rehash this receipt all their losers lose arguments on because it's about Obama getting in a fight with Congress that's out capital they say this had non-true yes it is link through so the plan results in no patent before this also destroys all ground resistance and tries to make up calls can be crafted solved link or acting reaction basis as like relations can be avoided by having them cut them attacking fairness outweighs logical debate it's worth it the neck always loses fairness protects from the makes debate education to moving target insurance and makes the plan conditional destroys fairness also it's on logical no single actor to depend another action even Congress has a lot of legislators they say we know this evidence citing voters is from the cross the term it's not Obama it's not about Obama fighting questions of authority which means that there's this is a responsible thing they say I'm Thompson's not a controversy ABC 328A the protection of men on track the U.S. Congress has legislated voters and impacts put out expected granted by the legislatures has members have a chance going record and Dems backed off to Mansky 326 and so time that's not going to make him so Obama and Senator up to men that will have whatever now fight to delay matters worse altogether no chance that also would have passed the IMF also evidence indicates that top of agenda and it's coming in April 3rd so that's the framing issue they say you come down and not only this that's also spy line for more innovation which means that we can counteract the reason why the economy is declining it also solves innovation which is our internal link even if the economy declines it doesn't mean that we don't have new technologies also econ decline non-level crux current 327 U.S. economy push for a break in improvement job market service let's track the U.S. government positive boosting action what's trying to return we will see the demand release for having truth and budget issue lead turn to the left side that's big reason growth of a stronger less and link stronger coming in curve that down we are saying that they say key to popularity there's no internal link for this there's no reason why the plan is necessarily lost in stuff is about Obama fighting Congress also there's no reason like this is Obama sticking to his core principles like not going to war it's about Obama fighting Congress over targeted killing it's also this evidence is also about Syria when Congress rejected military action which means that it's non-unique Obama should have already gotten the boost for that no reason the plan is linked to that they have to read when they say some question comes first it's already happened also future innovation solves the impact because it's cheaper also doesn't hurt the military atoms well physical mind in the underworld administration funding the troops industry telling one's contracts the exemption sequence no government station comes to question have to comfortable with and the central funky move flexibility future resource any part of being delayed that's under the nature might be as safer as they say all causes the hedge or it's resilience says 2 warrants first is the fact that manufacturing is serving this that solves this because it allows for us to have more innovation which will boost manufacturing that's a 1 and it's also second so GDP this evidence says GDP and debt with the dis that also it's also because we solve the economy internally also the evidence I just read indicates that that's not really not big of a problem or at least it's not and no they say PC relevant because it's tax evidence it's in the 1 and C indicates political capitalism also PC theory is real kind of relevant as mass carbon restricted when to use cloud move Congress president but that's several points of leverage use positive support and approach 9 100% with the benefits of opposition leaders less interest reply the leadership moves the agenda.
So I'm kind of confused. The link to politics is Obama fights over authority.
Yeah.
Okay, and the only link card in the debate is the O'Neill and 07 card.
Yes.
Okay, that says experts who study political calculations, the cost of pursuing defense of the presidents would be immediate. These costs include the expenditure of political capital that might have been used for more pressing purposes and increased friction with Congress. Fisher acknowledged that politics and practical considerations override constitutional principles. So the card that doesn't say authority.
What's
okay.
that? 740.
Yeah, 740. Okay.
Yes, that is the card.
Okay, a card that doesn't say the word authority. That's the authority link. Thanks.
It's a fight on Lunas, is the website.
O'Neill.
I'm done. I'm done. I got it. Did you get this? Is there a particular way to phrase it? Nope. I'll pull it up right now. No, don't worry. The way you should do it. You don't need me to. No, I will. I'll get it. No, honestly, the way you should phrase it. I'm worried. Is there a particular phrase? No. Okay, then I've already written it down. It's just like both is years. If it's both, then it doesn't sound very good. So yeah, it's like one. And then on my phone, it's true. You just think, well, that's just the GCC. Yeah, I know. Wait a second. That's that. Technique, sequestration and resilience. Is there something else wrong? No, I can't read that card. I'm reading 4 cards here because I'm finishing up 2 secret. This card. I'm reading EQ. Impressive. American Iron Man. Or reading losers. No, I need to open this document. Yeah, sorry. What? Huh? Oh, yeah, I lost it.
Great. 428-7.
Right, I saved it as one year around 6 in our Dropbox, but it should be the newest document that shows it. You already have it up. Uterus Shuri. Aggression. The court's counterclaim. The appropriations counterclaim. Politics.
with quartz.
You're correct. They're like connected and disconnected. What is the title? Oh, okay. Alright, we good? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me try that again. Okay, great.
Sharif is critical to Pakistan's economy, otherwise the Shah economy will be destroyed and is critical to multiple trading blocks. They have not answered the energy independence scenario, which causes escalating great powers. Other countries like Iran and India, Pakistan, cause large because it galvanizes India to invade Pakistan, which causes extinction, which is star evidence now. Yes, Russia war because Afghanistan is critical to U.S. withdrawal because that's critical to stability. And Pakistan is critical to withdrawal. It's not what we mean to have no unity. This argument aggression, yes, escalation, our oil levels indicates that the breakdown deterrence north east that stability will be global. Otherwise, it solves all their war scenarios because it's not hegemony. It's a result of nuclear deterrence, which the hegemony scenario doesn't answer. Russia, India, and Iran would likely get drawn in because of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and their impact defense doesn't answer the internal impressions means that there's an invisible threshold, which is increased likelihood of miscalculation. D never indicates that significant uncertainty is critical accident or war. It happens as a result of Asia because drones have changed the game, what it means for safe factors as well as the SAS counter get drawn and cause nuclear war now. The course kind of conditionality is voting issue. It's a recent rejected team. One condition kind of solves all of the offense you should be used to competing intermediates because this is what happens when they get two condition officers. They're able to cross play all of our two EC offenses against one counterpart to the other, especially when you're agent counterpart, which is unique offensive argument for why you should err from the two EC clash. It's critical to clash and education. Otherwise, the alternative is solar system negative flexibility doesn't outweigh because they get their shit is inevitable. One condition option solves all their offense inevitably. They get negative vibes because they have a 15-minute negative block against a 1-year time strategy permutation or not tested competition because only a tested competition. Literally, the two EC is the only way to get advocacy skills because they have to be able to stick to a stable advocacy. Yet worse, there are two double ways. Ace pointing to you should reject your cross application or visa pointing web evidence actually says authority is critical. The impact is perception. The case impact is the risk at any risk of the case outweighs which is impacted by the classic now solvent steps still applies because all of our solvent steps on the counterpart are based off authority. Now the appropriations counterpart permutation due to the counterpart there counterpart competes off of restrict not authority. Restriction modifies authority there. This distinction is one without a difference. I'll finish to a security to present the particular opponent check the present for where authority Congress based on how regulated the conduct of one of the appropriation process. Now their restriction argument doesn't apply because the restriction argument about statutory doesn't apply because both the plan and the counterpart are statutory. However, requirement refers to legislation black subject one statutory restriction limits and controls one of the place activities by ruling legislation restrictions on executive happens anytime Congress speaks its own authority. About 84 the was not the independent power of the opponent authority that permitted the same direction now because restriction war powers legislation was Congress spoken of authority to contract because the property of the war is substitute less property the next specific limitation present the use of armed forces and decided that the organization of hostility war power authority also means preparation for the conflict by 87 the world military fundamental function of armed forces to fight or be ready to fight words action executive branch part of the fundamental action of armed service ready for any type of hostility that or based on constant war powers authority present now this all themselves specificity their evidence are way too generic and sufficient just solve because cross proofs is argument why they cannot get their cake and eat it too counterpart proofs. The counterpart is a negative action while the plan is a positive action. That distinction is critical because only the plan sets up a binding congressional second for a consultation mechanism with the DCC. That's critical to be able to solve. Sure, there's a question of what is the government is research point out increase and reducing corruption and second growth. But we can build back on the barriers which does not happen space and push forward the objectives of crime that. Sure, we must build the right sequence institutional civil control the national security policy should take precedence treat myself. Sure, a civil national court the policy making the policy making body stream as a whole. The meeting with the DCC someone that can national security advisor on top of the department of the House, DC, monthly for to discuss the security and market security. Now, there is a reason why binding is critical. That's the reason why congressional signal is critical. If we do not know what the counterplan does, that is the reason why they lose. They cannot say that both the executive or the counterplan or both the executive or Congress will set up that mechanism because the counterplan text does not do that. They do not fiat it, so it cannot be an effective plan because they do not have any part of it. That is the reason why that is the reason why the app is inherent in the first place. They impact its perception, right? Or breaking that on the counterplan links politics as a distinction of authority. It's not because their O'Neill evidence actually does not even say this authority in the first place. This is a yes/no question, not a question of risk analysis, which is better for policy. We've also impacted their presidential authority, which I'll do on politics right now in the principle, which is the Dean evidence, because the Dean evidence and the Webb evidence, they are all the Webb is actually a senator, which Indigo, our previous Virginia senator, which proves that we have legal certainty now. The politics here first no impact to this economy. The sequestration should have already come to this argument. It's not critical internally because they have no reason why sequestration doesn't answer patent litigation because they're internally it's just about how people innovate countries now. There is also resilient hegemony, culpably evidence in the case of hegemony. We have numerous structural institutional checks that are able to resolve these arguments. Now the impact press is about just escalatory scenarios such as one fat white Sunday or the typical empiric waste and why Germany is not the current irreversibility. The arguments overseas U.S. role playing no countries talking to the police of the world. The states that said the interests of overseas U.S. patrolling the neighborhood has always served itself as crime. So ability to fully be a coincident with the stability system. Germany's present that but it never sees us as a connection. U.S. combat the world group more peaceful. U.S. forces no secret global shows. Racist spending election U.S. capabilities case out waste because we have a better time frame scenario now. Reforms are failed. There is a drop of war that litigation is decreasing right now. We said reforms would definitely not be able to solve this. Also, their reconciliation argument said the bill would never get watered down. Your unique our delay evidence in the case that the Senate has already kicked the can down the road. Too bad. Well, political capital obviously doesn't shape appreciative pre-credit recent action by why does none of this means having a practice Senate which is treating water supplies and several bill Senate and actually serving the Senate was small and Senate around the edges. That also means that they killed the bill out of the president of the Senate the first suffer they set back when the lady person pushed on consideration bill the next week the Africans have been waiting for the Senate to catch up with the number of members of the committee to push more changes affecting the rebellion goals to move into the committee. The rest of their uniqueness evidence does not say that political capital is key to getting it done. It just said that they are pushing and that it might pass. That also won't pass because there's opposition or Apartment 227 Senate judiciary members and Senate committee to push more changes to the labor deal eligible to push the bill in the committee. I don't think we should pass. It doesn't change this. We have more minority support now. The our projector argument on the team IMF level the data their defense on IMF doesn't apply because the IMF will still be restrained or models political capital which our evidence says it is draining out and makes Obama look weak now that particular losers lose reference to 3/4 of the rare Russia needed instead of the sharp content of the recent political environment of Ukraine Pakistan. We treat Senate and Pakistan comes back down to the strip. The IMF formal language to build deeper for the Obama mention which are proven the IMF prevention losers lose and losers win proven right now. The losers do not lose the political evidence to answer their best. Professor Michael Daylight for this argument losers also win. Russia repudiation means Obama fights and fighting is critical because it increases our approval rating status love and the American people serve the seat and change the state of the Obama to do the option market great Obama is getting in front of the Congress on Mark Congress that's critical to even get the rest of gender freedom aid and Congress watching the polls that Congress public opinion polls how president strong with no doesn't have a strong incentive opposing no popular president Obama wants to be more popular must keep Congress that is the reason why link union is always any kind of issues that the unions they have.
How much we have left?
Worked out 411. plan. UN politics.
Well, 2 and around 792 is presented out.
Hey, sorry, can you give the overview?
Yeah, core kind of plan, funding, counterplan, and politics. Everyone good?
Our interpretation is that the negative gets token to try to see successful. That's most particularly at the NDT when impossible to bring every affirmative. 2 offensive arguments. They try first and they flex again. Choose topic. Speak first, last second, negative, pre-round, pro. With the affirmative, it's the first time debating to stop the negative. To be able to see after multiplying against the negative, we're going to prove the opposite is a bad idea. That's heated fairness, have structural advantage. These stop with the negative, and they run always after on the stopping most split advocacy, increasing warfare, or food, distance, terms of policy, education, arguments. We are able to use all the charging. We can support that the app is the best policy, second strategic thinking. They could actually versus to see choose both the best arguments and what that officially plays all the charging free. It says that this debate, if they had made the best arguments on why legal authority is key for both counterparts, I would have applied to both and obviously answered power versus counterpart, but they did not make those authorities for cause general Congress key arguments on the court counterpart, which is a bad, which is just the 2 seats fall under reason conditions back people think always the only around education to get most managers go into policy accuracy, but they don't do everything related to topic based about developing skills to help us make smart decisions that affect our careers. The only from around decision, no drawback for strategic, there's no defense cues, and teams are faster, numbers arguments like the T theory means there will always be 2, the 1C checks outside bias, the 1C means the Afghan structurally alter the Afghan trying to deal with different arguments, the 2 checks the seat argument, the Afghan choose the best arguments, the answer positions, and develop them in 1 year, the 2 forced to choose one argument and answer everything. It's not real role, policy makes something correct, different issues, limiting those issues that affect policy decisions is not a reason why we don't get cross applications, because you could have just made those arguments. At worst, you just reject the cross applications because they can see sufficiency on the counter, which means we saw the which means we saw the when we see internal links now the counter plan. The counter is also 100% the case where since all funding for everything the plan wishes stops, so the person can no longer use TK Pakistan unless he gains support with the Pakistan defense committee sufficiency size. You feel the counter link conceded if the counter is sufficient to solve one of the internal links in the 1AC doesn't have to solve all of them because solving one internal link is sufficient. You should view the counter versus quo, not the plan. The other countries perceive the counter versus status quo, so including Sharif. So that is the extent you should view the counter because it sufficiently includes Sharif. There are two assignments from one aggression events that the U.S. is violating Pakistan's sovereignty right now because you don't see consent. The plan forces them to get consent. The Rogers evidence is about unwilling, unwavable. The counter plan forces them to get that consent, which obviously solves that. Their Dean evidence is about resolving executive uncertainty. The counter plan does that by setting a strict standard through funding appropriations, which isn't an idea drop their Goodman evidence of the second advantage. It's just that Sharif wants to freeze the counter plan sufficiently doesn't mean the Riken evidence just says that as well. Our evidence indicates the best method of checking the executive, which boosts solving because the only way you can actually prevent the force the president to comply, which means only the counter plan, which means only the counter plan, only the counter plan solves the case. Now the permutation debate. The permutation is severs for 2 reasons. First, the statutory restriction. The counter plan is an example of appropriation restriction, which is distinct from statutory restriction. That's the right answer you should prefer because it's topic specific and clearly distinguishes between the two. But they read a generic piece of blocks all evidence that just says it's legislation, but that does not apply because obviously statutory restriction is legislation. But there are other types of legislation that are distinct and not defined by statutory restriction. Our likeness evidence funding cuts are distinct because they don't legally change precedents. More powers you should prefer because in our LC evidence is distinct because congressional resource service reports we were trying to prefer evidence because it actually defines the two B's of each other. Well, none of their evidence does that. Second, it severs war powers authority. The counter prefers war powers authority. The plan restricts it. Our Taylor evidence is fantastic. It's the only piece of evidence that distinguishes power v authority. A distinction they have dropped authority is permission given to an agent. I.e. when an actor may do power is the agent's capacity to produce change. I.e. when an actor came to the counter plan prevents the exercise of authority by legally restricting what the person came to the counter plan doesn't change what the person may do, but because he can still legally do it. He just doesn't have the funds or maintain his evidence in the context of the counter plan. It says the funding restrictions just simply change how he can use his authority within his constitutional authority. It's the only piece of evidence in the context. Our social evidence authority is distinct from the exercise of power because the counter plan just changes the counter plan just changes the exercise of power. Their goal C84 evidence is not about the power of a person. It just assumes something like the plan, where the plan when intervening changes authority. It doesn't even mention the power of it doesn't even mention the power refers all our evidence in the context of war powers and presidential powers because if you read the
title of all our articles is about the powers of war, which is why you should prefer evidence. It's more recent, and it's more recent. The counterplan only prevents the execution of authority turned 12 Congress. The chief scholars, wait, such conditional appropriation have been made. How the president must have the president simply execute authority to make Congress powers limited to exercise their power. It's into and see doc. And it says severance of the voter makes that the moving target makes it possible for them to have a stable ground because of shifting. The big shifting like the breaking solvency. We do solve that was done all the over. We set the sufficient committee. Set the sufficient committee up. We're not getting our cake and eating it too. We don't solve authority, but all your plan text just says that Congress has to mandate the person has to do something. It's not the reason the count plan. That's not the reason the count plan does not lead to that because that's the only way the person can strike. They concede Obama wants it, which means he will do it. Now the links to politics made to concede a couple arguments or hater arguments in the case politics. Links to versus never all or nothing, which means the count plan definitely links to the plan also solves all their losers losing terms because Congress officially criticizes it, but it avoids the fight link because the president will never fight the plan because he doesn't want to veto comprehensive appropriations legislation's arguments they have dropped with the expert language. He's just perverted on the pattern from this hegemony. Always cops with transition words. Escalates global nuclear war. Turns case arguments that hegemony solves every scenario of conflict. Their sequestration argument is answered. Our Adams evidence says that it's not that they collapse hegemony just causes some lack of military contractors, but it didn't collapse innovation, which is not internally your institutional traps argument doesn't apply. You should reject your impact even space. They don't read you. Impact even is a 2 just 1 year sampling. Their West evidence is just about war, but pre-Cold War notions about post-Cold War notions are brew evidence in the context of innovation, which is brew evidence in the context of innovation. Why you prove they see litigation down to our good when evidence from the one answers to this legislation is still key in the status quo because patent trolls are undermining U.S. innovation. And a lot of one of our evidence was right on this. I say the Senate is 50-10. It's not true. The Senate will pass it. They've read evidence that says it's happening at the beginning of April. Record evidence that indicates patent reform likely to pass not because continue pushes key to getting over the finish line or dealer evidence of momentum and Obama's push is getting it done. And our McCown evidence indicates it's top of the agenda. Our U.S. official evidence is bipartisan support building because Obama's for the capital. The one see evidence indicates Obama's push is critical to Obama's push is critical to their IMF argument. We heard copies of evidence why the IMF was uncontroversial. We also read top of the agenda evidence indicates our vote is coming. The vote is coming early. The vote is coming early. April. Now the link to Peter O'Neill evidence is about a fight when the president defends his authority in order to fight the plan. This is not a losers lose argument. It's not Congress criticizing the president. It is about Obama fighting the plan. The counter plan solves all the losers lose argument because it's about Congress criticizing the president and passing a funding restriction, which means it solves the linkers, but it avoids the fight link, which means there's a politics link differential. We only have to win a small risk of this dissad to outweigh because the counter plan solves 100% of the case.
We have 427.
frame the counterclaim politics.
Right. Is everyone not ready? Okay. The counterplan's contrived into an argument in politics is how a tool of time which makes it easy 3-0 for the affirmative at the top of the framing argument of the counterplan solves and links in politics because it forces Obama to engage the DCC, which obviously is perceived in Congress and perceived in the public as him having to act on something which triggers their O'Neill evidence, which doesn't even say the word authority, or it means he doesn't solve because he doesn't have to engage the DCC, which means that there is not a consultative process, which in the entirety of cross-examination. I'll start with permutation due to the counterplan. It's not a question of authority, it's a question of restriction because restriction modifies authority. They have missed the boat. Our interpretation is that an enactment of the power purse decreases more powers. That's the Haynes evidence. A statutory restriction is a limit or a control placed by legislation that they have not to define what a statutory restriction is, which means that this is the only interpretation that legislates around our Glennon evidence indicates that anytime Congress speaks, that it decreases the scope of authority because Obama exists on implied powers, which means that restricting his power of the purse argument restricts his implied powers, and the Magnet evidence indicates that war power of authority is the ability to prepare for war, which obviously the power of the purse would trigger its authority because it would mean that we'll be able to prepare for war. That means that it both triggers the politics, it means it triggers the link argument, and it means that it justifies permutation to the counterplan because the counterplan in cross-examination, I said, what part of the act do they exclude? And they said statutory restriction of war power authority, which means if when the counterplan does both of those, then it means that it includes the affirmative in that it doesn't compete because that means the counterplan also steals the entirety of the affirmative, which is bad for the debate because it obviously means that negative would win in a world where they would say counterplan do the app. That's why presumption needs to flip affirmative in the world of counterplan. Where counterplan do the app on the negative would always win. That's why they had presumption has to flip. The affirmative also permutation doesn't have to be topical. It also solves the link because it proves there wouldn't be a fight because if it's true that it happens in tandem, then it means that it will resolve the backlash because it will change its political calculus. Now, it doesn't solve the net benefit argument. This is pretty much a crunch. It's not a sufficiency claiming that's a bad way to model debate. It's not the counterplan solves better than the status quo. No, it's a question of whether it solves better than the affirmative. That's why presumption flows affirmative. There are two massive solvency deficits. One is the authority solvency deficit. This is the Webb and the Dean evidence indicates it's the authority of the president that is what is enabling autocratic dictators to be able to model and have a dangerous drug proliferation evidence. This is cross-examination. That is the Dean evidence that indicates that in the world of the counterplan, a single nation like Russia or China could still point to the authority of the president and say that, oh, well, look, I don't need Congress, and that would legitimate drone strikes, which is the reason why if one country models and proliferates, all the solvency fails because it causes a domino effect, which other nations can model. That means that the risk of one country modeling authority is the reason why it doesn't solve. They don't have any solvency evidence for this counterplan anywhere close talking about the affirmative, which is why it's a crutch for specificity. Second, the DCC argument, the counterplan doesn't set up a binding consultation process for the DCC. This was cross-examination. You can't just assert both. That proves how asinine the counterplan is because it doesn't mandate it does. That's impacted by the Webb evidence and the Harvey evidence to indicate creating a binding regime with the DCC, which is the one error card, is the only way to be able to reform for Con, which makes it not be able to solve for the signal of the plan. Now the counterplan, because it doesn't create a legitimate binding process. Now the counterplan links to politics, or it does solve the link turns argument. But it doesn't solve the link turn arguments, but it links to politics. He has it backwards. We are impact turning the fight by saying yes, Obama fighting Congress is good, but the counterplan still restricts his ability to prepare for war, which they links to their O'Neill evidence, which doesn't even say the goddamn word authority. Now the politics has had two dropped arguments at the top that should frame the debate. One is the watered down argument. This was not answered in the two, and our merit evidence indicates that the Senate committee bills have no clue. They're juggling a litany of bills, and that there's an overload of information right now, which means that they're not capable of creating the best positive bill. This is a true argument because it's conceded, which means that you can vote affirmative on the Merlini or the merit evidence that says that, and the 2AC that says that the bill will not be able to solve. The second conceded argument is that the PC doesn't shape that. This is also devastating. The Shapiro evidence around the 1AR indicates that in the face of Obama pushing, the Senate is still doing nothing, which is the reason why even if we have Obama's political capital, the Senate is acting off of different interpretations of theories. They have evidence that says Obama is pushing and then the Senate is acting, but that is different from Obama pushing is causing the Senate to act. Our evidence says that Obama pushing is not causing the Senate to act, which is the reason why it shapes the way that you read their evidence. Now the impact of it's not new in the 1AR. It was an extension of the Copley evidence and justified because it's essentially Copley evidence that gives a sustainable framing as to why the war doesn't happen and why hegemony doesn't create peace, and also it's justified. It's not new, but it's also justified because they're allowed to argue against it because they're at once the impact. Now the first argument is that Copley evidence. This is pretty much devastating. The Copley indicates that manufacturing alternative causalities mean that the United States hegemony is going to be inevitable. Innovation may be crucial to some things, but our Copley evidence indicates that overwhelmingly the United States economy and other factors like military mean that we're going to be dominant, or the alternative is that it proves that these all causes are one because if patents can destroy hegemony, then it means that the Copley Copley evidence, the alternatives that the Copley evidence said should also reach the threshold of breaking down hegemony, which means collapse and never rewards resilience. Second is sequestration. There wasn't a good answer to this slide, but evidence indicates that it destroys our military capability, which their terminal impact is about. B, because innovation competitiveness is only an internal link into military technology, which our likelihood evidence says to destroy. Third is that Weiss evidence indicates that hegemony does not correlate with peace. Now, case turns the dissad. There was not a reason why the dissad turns case. They only said hegemony solves war, but this is a blanket assertion because our argument is that the United States drones is the one who started the wars. How do we deter ourselves? That means that there's no way that hegemony can deter the drone wars that started because of miscalculation, XM, which means because extinction. They don't have any impact defense we do, which means that the 1% risk on the counterplane sovereignty deficit means you can vote on try or die for the affirmative because in the war of drone escalation, there's no hegemony impact. We can destroy credibility, and everyone dies because it's based on miscalculation. Now, the link turn bait, this is pretty much game over here. Our evidence is way better. The first argument is that it's not going to pass right now. Our evidence indicates that it's bogged down in the Smitty. It's right now. It's getting hunt back till past April 3rd, which is the reason why Obama's not even engaging right now in this expo, which means there's no short-term link. Also, the IMF number, their evidence is really bad. Their first evidence is not even about the IMF bill, it's about the Ukraine bill, which is different. Their second evidence says that it actually wasn't lost. This argument about White's top of the docket doesn't answer the IMF number because the IMF number happened 2 days ago. So yes, that reform may be at the top of the docket now, but the IMF report failed, and it cost Obama a loss, which triggered political capital, which puts them in a double bind. Either disproves the thesis of the dissent that it means that political capital shapes it, or it means that he's already lost political capital in the face of the bill. Now, the link turn evidence, our Thompson evidence, as well, the Davis evidence is devastating, indicates that Obama fighting the plan is great because he gets to give a speech and he comes up and he's like, look at these terror-loving communists in Congress. I tried to kill the terrorists, but look at what they did. Our evidence says that's a flip reverse calls that gives some credibility in the eyes of the approval ratings of the people, which they read evidence from 1 year that says people popularity outweighs political capital because our evidence says that losers don't lose, but the winners win in the world of the public.
Can you send me the one you see that I was on?
Oh yeah.
You also need a new document with counterpart as part of it.
Do you want me to send you one too?
Yeah, we're doing that anyway. I don't think the plan is in this one you see. Did I get that?
Is it not at the top of the solvency?
Oh, I see. It's under the solvency. Yeah,
Sorry,
you're-
yeah, okay.
no,
I forgot to read your plan.
I apologize.
I read it in cross X.
Well, that means you didn't sever. So.
Yeah. Boom.
Does that leave me with nothing?
Sure.
All right, good debate. Is that 3-0 for the app?
I can go first. I think that the big problem in the 2NR is that spending too much time, one, on conditionality, which trades off on politics, and two, I think you're sort of assuming that if you win that there's a distinction between the plan and the counter plan, that you're going to win the debate. But I think that they're making a pretty good argument on this authority question, that the first advantage would be something that the counter plan would not solve, that the countries in question, Russia, China, etc., what they're looking to is the authority of the president. And, the web cards are, and I forget the other author, Dean, is pretty good on this question, that is what they're looking to. And so I don't know that I have to even really get into the question of is the counter plan the plan or not. Because I think if the counter plan isn't the plan in that it doesn't restrict the authority of the president, that there is a risk of that advantage being a disad to the counter plan. That said, I do think that there are some problems with the sort of counter plan debate, independent of that. I think that there is a distinction between what the plan does and what the counter plan does. The counter plan, right, as they argue, is a positive restriction, right? It requires us to do this. You know, if you read the plan, it actually says do targeted killings under this umbrella, right? Restrict the president's targeted killing authority by requiring that targeted killing operations be taken under the agreed upon specified areas with the Pakistani Defense Committee, right? Whereas the counter plan simply says rescind the funding targeted killing operations that are not agreed upon specified areas, which there's like a word missing, with the Pakistani Defense Committee of the Cabinet, henceforth, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think that the counter plan necessarily mandates the establishment of the consultation. And so if that is the case, that seems problematic for the second advantage. If the counter plan does mandate the consultation occur, that would be a restriction on the authority of the president. I think that the power of the purse cards that are being read don't assume that portion of the plan, at least not as well as it's explained. The cards you're reading do say things about conditions and riders, but still it seems to be sort of negative. You can only do this if the other thing happens, right? It doesn't mandate that the other thing happens like the plan does. And so either they're identical, presumption would go affirmative, or they are distinct, which I think creates risk of case as disad to the counter plan. The politics disadvantage, I think that you just don't get there with enough time to really explain the link/internal link to patent reform. You just sort of assert that there'll be a fight and political capital matters. There's never an explanation of why the fight sucks political capital. The 1AR and the 2AR are both pretty good on the question of, no, fights actually boost political capital. And, you know, arguably, a couple of the cards that Richard reads are new in the 1AR to get the internal link to that turn, but that's not a question in the 2NR. And so I really don't think I need to get into the uniqueness debate that much, because I think they just win that only the plan is a fight, and as a consequence, right, they win the link on the debate, because I think that they have the explanation in the 2AR as opposed to just not enough time in the 2NR on that. So
I can go next. I approach it from a different angle in the same result. I thought I'll assume in my mind that the counter plan is essentially and that you solve the whole thing, but you know, that is an inherent tension with the idea that you don't leave politics. I think the counter does competition arguments here to be like, look, the count is essentially the app, so obviously it's politics in the same way. I don't think the negative evidence, I think you could probably spin the negative evidence to be a good argument. This is like a populism. I just think that you need to do a lot more because it's inherently unpersuasive that the calculates both the affirmative and doesn't have politics. So I don't think you have that benefit. I will kick the counterclaim for you and evaluate politics on its own. The argument that I sort of thought the act could think of had on is I don't really think that patent reform is key to agility or even competitiveness. I think that they make their cards about, I think that wife's card sort of indicts the theory of agility, remorse and stuff, and I just don't think your 1-1-NC bench card is good enough on that level of specificity. And their merit evidence about like how the threat of patent trolls and the quantum of litigation is all sort of pumped up and overblown. The real problem is the ambiguity of like software patents and things like that is more specific than your patent reform key cards. And I also sort of in the background, I don't really think you ever have a card that patent troll problem is key competitiveness even. I don't think your cards. I think you need a card that makes that jump even to your internal pitch. So that's not good for me. And then when you're not extending impact D to the affirmative, that's a bad position to be in.
I guess I decided to leave it different. I thought that I couldn't find a solvency deficit basically at all. I could split some hairs maybe, but like really nothing. Competition, I didn't really get time to evaluate. I just determined that I was not going to vote on the dropped severance burns equal VI thing because there just wasn't enough there. I thought there was definitely zero risk of the DA though because of the watered down argument, which the 2NR did not address for me. I was a little apprehensive about that because it's kind of blippy in the 1AR, but I thought he was particularly good in the cross-ex on it, and that just sort of, those words were very clearly in the 1AR, and that should have really been a flag that you should get to for that reason. And I also think they definitively control the direction of the link on politics with the popularity argument. I thought that the 2AR comparison of the internal link evidence was pretty solid about how their evidence says he might be using PC, but it doesn't actually change anyone's minds on the ground. It's good. I thought the quoting from your evidence about it, how it being about focusing public attention was important in sort of establishing the link. By the way, you also could have quoted that right before their line it says supporters hope, which means that that's not really something the author believes, and to me that just makes the whole card, that whole sentence kind of unpersuasive. No one compares the strength of the link, but it's pretty clear that which link is more important, that goes in the direction of popularity, so it's kind of zero risk of politics. I did not understand why the counterpoint linked to politics at all because of the sort of weird stuff you do with the spending bill. That wasn't super well addressed earlier in the debate, but it was clear to me in the cross-ex and they really reacted to it. So I didn't think they really pushed on it anywhere else to make any action happen, except for when he tried to say that the thing that have to pass after the plan would cost PC, but it wouldn't because the only link that's been read is about price power, which that wouldn't be. So yeah, I don't know. If you guys have questions, I can answer them. I think that mostly covers it.
Thank you, Richard.
Oh, sorry, I do want to say one thing. I thought you got a fantastic concession in the cross-ex that you could have capitalized on. It wouldn't have mattered a ton, but just, in general. When you asked him, if the app only does Pakistan, this stuff is on the books everywhere, how do you solve it? He's like, well, the only place we do it in Pakistan, as long as we stop that, it's all good. So it's like, if the counterpoint stops the drone strikes, it solves everything. I mean, I didn't think they had a solvency deficit, but if they did, I thought that would have eliminated anything they said subsequently.
Good debate.
Matt, where was that? Did someone sit in that debate? I can't look that up.
Yes.
Do you know who it was?
No.
I guess we do our handshake, so gotta put it in there. I don't want to be left out.
We've had 5 rounds in a row that are pretty tough. Let's indicate that.
It is true. Been saying it's the tavern. just keep it all D6.
True.
Keep the whole judgment pool in D6.
Alright. Mr. Strong. Give the rich do whatever you want to. It seems to be.
Oh, we got to see the one.
No, okay. Alright, this is the building. Yeah. Check.
Next round, let's get it done.
Oh, yeah.
Motion was strong note.
You know what you
gotta do?
Yeah.
Start going. Charlotte! Richard, don't go anywhere. You look like you've gone somewhere. Don't do it.
And the next thing is
I don't think anyone's particular. Like, in some cases, yes, but there's been a lot of movement, so. Yeah.
Good luck, bro.
Yeah.
You sure? Did you design it yourself?
No, it took me completely by surprise today. I was like, why? This looks my face. So all of y'all
What was that? Landing almost super blew it yesterday. I got real mad. Because Landing almost super right. We were all like, oh, sorry. He's like, Richard, oh, my God, you have his face on it. Richard was like, what? And I was like, Landing, let's go bye. And I was like, wait, did you honestly think that we were all just like picking a senior and we're in the dirt and then we all chose Nelson? Like, are you kidding?
So honestly, like NDT was really close to winning, but
yeah, no, the kind of
for me, they would have needed to basically just have like.
Yes, I completely agree.
This just like because they were kind of this middle of the road thing where they were like of course sometimes you need to like engage with.
Oh, I downloaded that.
Yeah.
And I was.
Focus on deeper structures that happens like
Yeah, but not like a, not
like.
But we didn't have.
Basically just like no option.
that's what we got to
That's that. I thought you were like that's the
I think he kind of like in context to one.
These are the tricks that
So that just applies to
He's talking
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that is, I think, what it is. I just wanted to make sure that that was damn clear.
Focus on the law of that, and then like target.
Oh yeah, this show is not comprehensive, it's just like the
Even like
new.
this could have been like 3 minutes, where it's just like
The new and
yeah,
unexpected.
put epistemology before the law. Main argument is these two 1AC cards where they use the state of exception term 57
No,
times
because,
and then say that the state of exception started equal more powers.
I had mentioned Mr. Justin last time, he quickly pointed that out to me as well.
I completely forgot.
Yeah, perms. Yeah. I was really tired, and you said that, and I was like, that's not really works. Is that mine?
No.
Yep, it is.
Something
so,
to say.
I feel like the most useful thing for you to do would be to start doing.
That's what I've been doing.
Okay, I'm gonna send you.
These two or those one?
No, do you want to go back to the big room? Because it applies to more things, you see?
Oh, she needs
What? Okay, no. She like this.
It's just one.
Distance.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, that's
okay.
what I was thinking. Like,
Undistinguished alone by room.
Okay, let's do this.
Those things.
So I'm gonna send you the updates that I did.
I think
I'm trying
Wow.
harder.
Thank you. Good debate.
Catch you later, Sean.
Catch you.
Are we still on the stream? No, I hope not. I'm just looking at Lee on that computer and it's freaking me out. Like that.